Thank you for joining us today for our presentation on sales tax, utility studies, and savings. If you're a manufacturer in New York State and using electric and or natural gas for your manufacturing process, you are in the right spot. So I just want to welcome our partner presenters today. We have Precis Energy with us today and Engineering, I'm sorry, and EnergyMark with us today. I also want to welcome Buffalo Niagara Manufacturing Alliance members that have signed up today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Carolyn Powell. I am the Business Development Director here at Tronconi Segarra Associates. I will be your host today. There is a toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. There is a chat section if you want to send me a casual note. Let me know if you have any technology issues. And then we also have a Q&A section. Feel free to put a note in there if you have a question for one of our presenters. We'll look to get those answered either throughout the presentation or in the end. And then also in the handout section is a copy of the presentation if you want to download that. After the presentation today, you will receive an email with a survey. If you could complete that, give us some feedback on the presentation. If you have any questions afterwards for our presenters, want to set up a meeting, or if there's other topics you want to hear in the future. But without further ado, let's get started. Tronconi Segarra Associates, we are a certified public accounting and business consulting firm. Andy Toth is with us. He is a CPA in the state and local tax group and has over 30 years experience both in the public and private sectors. Josh Capparella is with us today. He's a principal and vice president of engineering at Precis Engineering. He has over 20 years experience in the industry. Precis Engineering is a comprehensive architectural and engineering services firm. And we have Andrew Waters with us today. He's a senior account manager at EnergyMark with over 12 years of experience. EnergyMark is a locally owned West New York energy services company. They supply local low-cost electricity and natural gas throughout Western New York. So I am going to hand it over to Andy to get us started.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to you guys out in the Midwest that are tuned into this as well. We feel it's a very timely subject with the cost of utilities have gone up quite a bit since last year. In addition, in New York State a few years ago, our governor decided that he wanted to add additional sales tax on the utilities by taxing the transportation portion when you're purchasing the commodity from a third party. So there's lots of cost with energy, and what we're hoping to do today is show you some savings opportunities that you may not be taking advantage of currently. I've worked with Josh Capparella. He's based out of Philadelphia. He does the actual calculations of what's getting consumed in your facility. My role when I work with Josh is I go through and apply the tax law to the equipment that we're claiming the exemptions for. Josh and I have done these throughout the country. We've in some instances we can do it remotely without going to your facility. And that's basically done through Zoom meetings, doing virtual walkthroughs of your facilities. The obvious savings there is travel costs. If you have a more complex operation, then we're going to have to be boots on the ground to actually do the walkthrough with you. So the good news is in New York State does allow an exemption from sales and use tax for utilities used in manufacturing. This requires a calculation of the exempt percentage of fuel in utilities used in manufacturing and research and development. To do this, you're going to need to do a study of the facility and the equipment to figure out what that exempt percentage is. So in New York State, what we mostly work with is gas and electricity, but there's other fuels that are available, such as fuel oil, refrigeration, steam, are all utilities that are available for exemption under manufacturing in New York State. New York State defines the term fuel as any commodity which produces heat or energy. I haven't seen this very often, but it can include wood or coal or radioactive materials. So I can honestly say I have not dealt with any of those, but if you've got that out there, we can figure out how to calculate it, I'm sure. Term gas is any gaseous subject, inert or otherwise, used in the performance of production function or to create an atmosphere which is conducive to or necessary for production. So that sounds pretty good. You've got a manufacturing facility, New York's behind you. You've got an exemption out there available for these utilities that you're using. Of course, like with anything else in New York, there's always a catch. So New York goes a little bit further into defining what actually qualifies. And one of the limiting things is it's got to be directly used. And directly is operating exempt production or machinery or equipment. So that's pretty easy. Electricity that runs your equipment, that's pretty easy to understand. Another area that creates conditions necessary for production. So, that can be the temperature of the room, the humidity of the room, or performs an actual part of a production process. So, I do have clients out there that electricity is actually consumed as part of the production process, which is, different than just running the equipment in the facility. So directly doesn't sound too bad. It sounds like you're still gonna be able to get a pretty good deduction there. But of course, they've got to go one step further and they've got to throw in exclusively. So exclusive is 100%. So that's going to knock some of those things that you would intuitively think qualify for deduction in your manufacturing facilities. So one of them, which you may find quite surprising, is overhead lighting. Overhead lighting is not used directly or exclusively in production. So New York State will not allow a deduction for overhead lighting. Now, other states do, and it kind of makes sense because the guys running the machinery need light to see, or assembling something need light to see. But for whatever reason, New York does not seem to think that you need it for your manufacturing process. There is one instance where you are allowed to deduct the overhead lighting, and that's going to be mostly exclusively, I'd say, in print shops where they need full spectrum lighting. Basically look at the printed jobs to make sure the colors are coming out right, they're not running. So in that instance, you can use it. So overhead lighting, a lot of facilities, it's a big chunk of energy. That light is not going to be able to be used for this exemption. Another big area in facilities is the HVAC system, the heating and cooling. And what New York goes back to is this 100%, this exclusive use again. And the issue there is if you've got a piece of equipment running in a room by itself, that's okay. You can take the HVAC for that room. If you got a room with people in it, New York State likes to argue that, well, yeah, you might need it for the equipment or the operation, but you've also got people in there that are getting the benefit of this deduction as well. So it's no longer exclusive because you're keeping your employees warm or you're keeping your employees cool. So they'll like to knock that out. So now, not all is lost there because an argument can be made even when you have people in the room. And basically, it's creating the conditions necessary for you to do production. And what that is we're usually talking about temperature and humidity control. Very important in a process like printing. Humidity is too high in the print shop, the inks aren't going to dry, it's going to cause a problem for you. We've also been able to argue, make the same argument in some machine shops, where the temperature of the room, the humidity of the room is very important for metal tolerances. It's hard to make when you've got a wide open floor, but when you get to facilities where the machine shop is closed off, you can definitely see there's some kind of control going on in that area. We can usually make that argument. And one of the more obvious ones is a clean room. Clean rooms, in addition to dust control and everything else, temperature control is very important. So we can usually get the HVAC room in most clean rooms. Other things we've run into is in electronics manufacturing, static electricity is a huge worry in these facilities. If you're manufacturing a component that a static electricity charge from an employee can basically destroy that part when you're manufacturing it. So in New York State, we're all familiar with static electricity in the wintertime. The humidity in your house drops below 20%. You're walking around, you touch something, you get a shock. Well, when that happens in electronic components manufacturing, it can be detrimental to that piece that you're manufacturing. Other places where the HVAC can be deductible is storage of work in process. We have one facility that was storing lithium batteries. They had to keep the humidity in that room below 4%. That's way below the comfort level for a human being, so it's easy to make that argument that was very important there. Meat processing is another area. Everyone on the call is probably thinking in terms of manufacturing. We do a lot of work for grocery stores in New York State, and the manufacturing process for the definition of New York State doesn't end until that meat is in its final packaged form. So basically, after it's sliced and put in that little plastic zip bag that they give to you to take your sliced meat home. Storage in those areas are very important. Meat processing areas, I think most of those are kept below 40 degrees when they're making hamburger and slicing meat and stuff like that. It's basically for bacteria control and other things. So, you can see when you're in a facility and we knock HVAC out, knock lighting out, that's a big chunk of energy. So what we typically find in New York State is that most manufacturing facilities are going to fall in a range of between 60 and 80% of exempt manufacturing use. I've been in facilities where probably the entire floor is CNC machines, small offices up front. They weren't able to claim the HVAC and the overhead lighting. And because of that, they came in the low 60s, which is surprising considering the amount of equipment they had in the room. So this exemption is out there. So how do we go about claiming it? So when the gas and the energy sources are used both in production and non-production activities, a lot of facilities would come to, they're supplied through a meter. So we must do an allocation on the meter to determine the portion that's directly used and exclusively used in production. And this has got to be done per meter. So if you have more than one meter in your facility, you've got to calculate this exemption on each meter. New York State, of course, has a great reg on this. So the user must maintain adequate records with respect to the allocation of fuel, gas, electricity, refrigeration, steam used directly and exclusively in production and for non-exempt purposes. They go on in the second part to say that you basically need to do the study on this, and you must submit either a survey done by an engineer or you can do your own calculations to show how you arrived at what was exempt and what was taxable. So the purpose of the utility study itself is to identify the percentage of utilities consumed in the manufacturing process. Determining the energy consumption by all equipment in a facility is beneficial because it allows you to reconcile the calculated consumption with the actual energy used. We like to use an engineer to do these studies. We find that if you just go and take the plate information off the equipment and then use the New York State formula to do the calculation, this doesn't always work out. My colleague Tom attempted this years ago, and when he calculated according to the formulas provided by New York State, the energy consumption on just the manufacturing was like way over the utility usage for the entire building for the year. So we immediately knew we had a problem there. So the nice thing about these studies is they're done by an engineer. They're very thorough. It makes it hard for New York State to challenge it. New York State does not have an engineer on staff to challenge these, and they usually don't want to go out and hire one. It's not to say that an auditor isn't going to comb through there and try and find some piece of equipment that they think is an exempt, and then you have to have a discussion with them about that. But it does make processing refunds or supporting your utility usage in an audit a lot easier. The other advantage is facilities change, equipment comes and it goes, you get more energy efficient equipment. A lot of companies have done upgrades in lighting for energy efficiency. And so basically what that does is we've got more energy efficient lighting. That means our taxable use goes down. That means our exempt percentage goes up. So, you know, getting an update on that study or on those replacement lights is important for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh now, and he's going to walk through the details of how we actually go about coming out to your facility doing one of these studies.
And before we do that, I'm going to jump in with a quick poll just to kind of see where people are at. So just a quick question, are you currently paying sales tax on your production process, the electric and gas consumption of it? A couple of options there for you. Give everybody a quick minute to just type in their results. Looks like we have about 50% of people voted, so. Give you another minute, a couple seconds, and we'll close this out. Generally, it looks like we need to ask somebody else within the facility if we've done that, or if we're doing that or not. So let's see where this ends up. I'm going to close it out in 3, 2, 1. And just to kind of share with everybody, so you know that you're not alone. Some people, great job, they already have a utility study and they're not paying sales, and a bunch of people need to go find somebody to ask. So thank you, everyone. Josh, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Okay, so when we're brought onto the Tronconi team to conduct a utility study, our job as the engineer is essentially to triage all the energy usage into its constituent pieces. So most of the time this can be for gas, electricity. We've done refrigeration with the team as well in the past, but today our discussion will focus on electricity because it's the most common area where exemptions can be taken. So for electricity, this is typically broken down into HVAC and lighting, and then taxable equipment and exempt equipment. So as Andy said, this needs to be done on a per meter basis because that's how you purchase the electricity with sales tax, of course. So at the start of the study, we ask for utility invoices, fixed asset list or equipment list, drawings of the facility, sequences of operation for both exempt and taxable equipment, hours of operation, and then any lighting or HVAC equipment inventories that you may have. We've never gotten 100% compliance on our information request, and that's okay, because the next step is to visit the site where we need to, or speak to company personnel. Specifically, it's usually facilities folks, to fill in the blanks, to get all of the information we need. And the length of the survey depends really on how much equipment there is and what kind of data is available to us ahead of time. All right, so next, yep. So the essential of the function of the utility study is to build the energy usage model that reconciles with your invoices for the facility, so that the accounting team and the state and its auditors can clearly see a quantified breakdown of where the electricity is going. To do that, we need the utility invoices per meter, if applicable, like we said. And the rest of the steps shown here are needed for us to build the energy model. We gather all the needed information, which comes via the pre-existing documentation, or we fill in the blanks during our site survey. So from that, we build schedules of all electricity consuming equipment that include full connected electrical load, hours of operation, and the approximate diversity. So with guidance from Andy's team, we then determine taxable versus exempt status and prepare a report to document the findings. And to add another note on whether the survey can be remote or on site, as Andy was discussing, the availability of the documentation is really important, as is the number and really the complexity of the equipment in determining whether we need to be on site or not. We have done a lot of studies completely remote. We've performed studies for multiple facilities for a printing company. Each of them had a dozen or so, sometimes more, pieces of large equipment. And most of the operational data we can gather through a series of remote teleconference meetings with the facilities personnel. On the other hand, some of the facilities we've done work with had little to no documentation. Some of these facilities have literally hundreds and hundreds of pieces of equipment. And those are the types of facilities that we really recommend that we come out and spend a few days on site surveying those things. Okay, so Andy mentioned the New York State guidance. They have the published guidelines available for determining how to calculate equipment energy usage, and then to determine your exempt percentage, you simply take the exempt energy usage and divide it by the totally energy usage on the meter, and that is your proportion of electricity purchase eligible for exemption. Okay. So some of the other equations that the state provides, this is specifically looking at equipment that has motors, whether you know the horsepower or whether you don't. The next slide, Carolyn, shows the equations for lighting, and for the fluorescent lights, you can see there's a slight calculation there to accommodate the ballast. And finally, just for general equipment, taking the wattage to confirm the kilowatts per hour multiplied by the hours. All right, so these equations that the state provides are simplistic. So what's missing? The equations that the state provides aren't wrong. They're really just missing some of the important pieces needed to derive the most accurate calculation. So the equations that you see here are used by engineers when calculating equipment energy usage and are considered GEP or good engineering practice. So what's important about that? These are very commonly known and used in the industry when sizing equipment or designing systems But we also use these as approved methods for calculating energy usage when you're applying for equipment energy rebates, like those that you can get through NYSERDA or other utility programs. So don't want to get too nitty gritty here, but notice that there's a phase correction there. So anything that you have on three-phase power needs a correction. And the power factor correction is important specifically for inductive loads, motor loads, as well as the equipment efficiency and the diversity. And the important takeaway here is these corrections are significant, and without a proper understanding of how to apply these formulas, you may be over or under calculating your equipment loads. So in a lot of these facilities, much of the larger equipment is going to be exempt, so you're potentially leaving money on the table. When you have something on, say, 480 volt three-phase equipment, the square root of the phase is root 3, so 1.7. So if you don't include that, you're underestimating the load of that equipment by almost half if you're not accommodating this. Over the years of doing these with Andy's team, we've come across some pretty complicated pieces of equipment. We've looked at complex printing processes with multi-storied printers and conveyors. Andy mentioned clean rooms that are required to do intricate electronics manufacturing, as well as life sciences work, aerospace equipment production facilities, large cold storage facilities cooled by central ammonia chilling equipment. So the point is understanding the complexities of these systems and how they work is really key to gathering the proper information needed in order to get their usage calculated properly. Okay. So the other piece is HVAC, and this is the other area where the formulas are frequently misapplied. HVAC really should be modeled in software specifically designed to calculate energy consumption based on normalized weather data. So that looks at building construction, the occupancy, the heat loads generated from equipment or lighting. It also takes into account the summer and winter thermostat set points, nighttime or weekend setbacks, number of people in the space, the type of system, whether it's DX or chilled water, constant air volume or variable air volume, what type of heat you have, gas, electric, or steam. And it calculates the fan energy, cooling energy, heating and humidification energy separately so we can extract the components that only use electricity for our calculations. The other thing we do is correlate the model against the prior year's electric bills. So we do an analysis to correct for deviations in the previous year's data to the average data, which is gathered over 30 years. So there could be significant corrections required there. The point is that the model is required really to get the most accurate usage of energy data for a year's usage. And I think this is somewhat intuitive, right? So weather is cyclical, and so is the cooling energy consumption required to keep your building cool. So if you just took the connected electrical data, you would come up with a consumption that is way too high, oftentimes an order of magnitude or more higher. And as Andy mentioned earlier, since HVAC most of the time is considered taxable because it's for creature comfort, it's really important to get this number calculated accurately and therefore, as low as possible. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Andy, to discuss some of the other methods that you've seen for performing these calculations in the past.
Great, thanks, Josh. Before I turn it over to Andy, I'm going to launch another poll, just real quick, to see, have you utilized a utility study on your production process in the past? No, and then other options we have, just kind of what the time frame of that has been. just kind of see where people are at. While you are doing that, don't forget also too, if you have a question for one of our panelists and experts today, just feel free to jump that in the questions box in the toolbar and we'll get those answered. Have a lot of people voting. We'll give this a couple more seconds. Looks like a lot of people haven't done a study yet, so great to have you on with us today and learning more about it. A couple of you have had it in the past. Give you a couple seconds on this, but good to see so many people are on and learning about this and getting some savings into their facilities. Okay, I'm going to close it out in 3, 2, 1. And just kind of share the results. So again, most people have not had a study in the past. A couple have within the last couple of years. So, okay, keeping it going. Andy, back to you.
Thank you. It's always interesting to see what people are doing or how they're figuring out what's exempt in their facilities for utility usage. Some years ago, my client assured me that they had a utility study done. And I said, great, let me see it. And it took them quite some time to find it. And it was basically handwritten sheets. And one of the things that stood out to me is they were taking almost 100% deduction on their gas that they were using in the facilities. And I go, when was this study done? They go, I don't know, probably in the 70s. So at that time, in their facility, they had a lot of ovens, and the ovens at that time all used gas. The ovens they currently use all run on electricity, and virtually none of their gas qualified for exemption in their facilities. The HVAC was mostly taxable except for a few clean rooms. So, even if you've had a study done, it's not a bad idea to update it once in a while. As I said before, you can purchase equipment now that's more energy efficient. Overhead lighting is more energy efficient. HVAC systems are more energy efficient. So, if you have one, good. It's even better if it's a recent one. So, during my travels, in addition to that story, I've run across a few other methods which I've only highlighted the ones I've found most interesting and really don't relate to calculating the actual usage. Probably my favorite is percentage of square feet used in production. Obviously the square footage, there's no correlation to that in the equipment that resides within that square footage, but a couple facilities have tried that. Now, interestingly enough, Massachusetts does allow that calculation. So I don't know if this was the remnants of somebody moving here from Massachusetts, but I have come across that. Summer winter analysis, the idea there is, well, we're not heating the building in the summer, so that gives us more accurate what gas is used in production, and we're not cooling the building in the winter, so that lets us know what's not being used for HVAC. Well, what I found in a lot of these manufacturing facilities is that's not true. Heating is used in some of these facilities, even in the summertime, especially when they've got production processes that are sensitive to humidity. They might turn the heat on to get some of that humidity out of it. Also, with the operation of large pieces of equipment, sometimes in the dead of winter, they've got to have the HVAC on to get the room cooler, just because of the heat that's being thrown off by that equipment. So summer and winter doesn't always work as well. Energy consumed on a weekend. I guess if you're running a facility 24/7, that might give you some idea of what's being used in production. Presumably your administrative people won't be around. But, again, trying to convince an auditor that that was your study methodology, I don't think is going to fly. And then probably my all-time favorite is let's study of the machinery and equipment not used in production. So the following slides It was done by a consultant locally, CPA. You know, it was a large facility. Facility is primarily office space, very little production in it. Occasionally, they had large pieces of equipment there that they were doing R&D work on. You know, they were working on processes before they sent this equipment out to the field for production. So equipment wasn't there running 24/7. It wasn't even running like on a weekly basis. So, you know, that's a complexity, but, you know, something you got to be able to calculate. So the consultant did the calculations with his electrician buddy, and, you know, he's pretty proud of it. They even figured out how much energy the microwave in the cafeteria was using, and the refrigerator, and, you know, they got some information on the computers in some of the offices. And so they basically came up with, out of over 2 million kilowatt hours of annual usage, 900,000 kilowatt hours were taxable. So that left 58% is exempt. Now, a friend of mine worked in that facility, and they didn't hire us because we were too expensive. So he said, hey, he goes, this guy came back with 58%. He goes, what do you think? I go, there's no way your facility is above 20%. It's almost all offices. Nothing's going to qualify. So I took a quick look at it, and just from other studies I've done with Josh, I noticed the HVAC, especially for building that size, seemed way off. So I sent it down to Josh. I said, hey, Josh, I go, take a look at this. And he goes, yeah. He goes, there's no way the HVAC is right. He goes, they're probably missing information for the fans. So I went back out to the facility, met with the facility manager, got the fan information, sent that down to Josh. He did a quick calculation. So turned out that they weren't actually using 38,000 kilowatt hours annually. They were using over 1 million kilowatt hours annually for their HVAC system. Huge difference. At the end of the day, you know, we came up with a 19% exempt use on this facility. I still think that was high, but, you know, again, we weren't there to do a full-blown study. We didn't actually look at most of the other calculations that were done. But, you know, the client seemed to be happy with that and wanted to move on. CPA who did the study, he, you know, he justified his calculation because during July and August, they had this big piece of equipment there that they were doing the R&D work on. So it kind of made sense. July and August usage were really high. Now, Josh talked about this earlier, the cooling degree days. That year was a particularly hot July and August in Buffalo. You know, temperatures were in the 90s quite often. And if you look at the chart on the right, you know, the historical usage is is the red bar. The blue is what was used that July and August. You can see it's almost off the charts. So, you know, the CPA never considered that it was a really hot August. It was, you know, he was going to justify it by the piece of equipment being there. So the moral of the story is you really need someone who understands how energy is consumed in the whole facility. You know, not just being able to calculate a few things like computers and microwave ovens. So once you got your study done, how do you claim this exemption in New York State? New York State, unfortunately, it's an all or nothing with New York State. Either you're going to claim 100% exemption, and you can do that by filing an ST 121 exempt use certificate, or you're not going to claim an exemption at all, and you're going to file for refunds and credits as you go along. Other states, when we calculate that percentage, we can send in an exemption certificate to the utility with that percentage on it, and then they're only going to charge tax on the taxable portion of their bill each month, a lot cleaner. New York State does not allow that. On the ST 121 form, you're going to check box out for purchases of utilities, and then check off the applicable utility and send that on to your utility provider. So once you have the study done, if you've been paying tax on your utilities, you can apply for a refund. You can go back up to 36 months. You're going to file an 11. You're going to provide your utility bills along with the survey that was done by your engineer, and claim your refund of all those sales taxes you paid in the past. So as an example, example A here is a client or a customer chooses to pay 100% on their electricity purchases. You know, if you're going to do that, that means you're either taking a credit when you file a return, your quarterly, monthly sales tax returns, or you're going to apply for a refund. Either way, you've got to provide additional documentation to the state. This might be recommended. A lot of the grocery stores that we do work for, they tend to pay the 100%, get the refund later, because the utility exempt usage is very small and they don't want to be writing big checks every quarter. They just rather pay it through the utility bills and get a refund later. Again, for the refund exemption, file the ST-121 form, or if you got a direct pay permit in New York State, you can file that as well. The other method is you're not going to pay any sales tax. And if you're going to do that, that means when you're filing your monthly, quarterly, annual return, you've got to pay use tax on that taxable percentage of your utility use. So it's going to show up as a taxable purchase times your tax rate, and you're going to remit the sales tax at that. So we're providing some other information here, and we don't have enough time to go into details on these things, but there's other programs, other utility providers, other New York State agencies are providing benefits, reductions in taxes programs that you can take advantage of. NYSERDA, the New York Power Authority, Recharge New York, all have programs out there, whether it's rebate credits, whether it's reduced energy costs. If you have questions on that, you know, send us an email, give us a call. You know, we can certainly get back to you on whether or not you qualify for any of these programs. Okay, now I'm going to turn this over to Andrew Waters. He's going to talk to you about how you can save money on your commodity purchases. So go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks, Andy. It's probably not too uncommon for you guys to all pull into a gas station and see that we're all paying higher energy prices for everything nowadays. And consistently in the last 6 months, we've been in quite a spike. Carolyn, can you swing up to our first slide there of the charts of electricity prices? Yeah, perfect. So this chart here will show you really kind of the nightmare that's happened to electricity prices. And I'm sure most customers and manufacturers on these lines are aware that roughly 60% of your budget is supply rated. And I'm sure you guys are all using suppliers to hedge or lock in your future costs. And you may be under some kind of contracts now for some terms, but now is probably the best time to be looking at these things, because as much as we're in a very, very high energy state as far as cost, when you get out to long term of 24, 25, and 26, that is 22, 24, and 25, and 26, the long term 3-year terms, they're much lower than what we're in this little bit of a crisis with UK and Russia causing bad energy prices. Collectively, if you're a mid-sized manufacturer, you paid roughly around $100,000 to $140,000 budget, you can pretty much assume that it's going to be about $190,000 right now, where current energy prices are in the next 12 months in comparison. So you're seeing a 32% increase in generally your overall supply costs. And really in the next few months of gas prices are close to more around a 60% increase in prices. So we would really encourage you to look at your budgets now long term. New York State is also in a Go Green initiative that I'm sure everybody is very aware of. So there's other great programs like community solar and some of the NYSERDA programs that Andy referred to that will allow you to have incentives to lower your costs. I've done NYPA applications for numerous manufacturers as well, so I'll be happy to help you fill out these applications. Certainly jobs and retaining jobs is much of these programs. So if you have expansion projects or if you don't have any NYPA at your manufacturing plant, I can help you kind of correlate through that application. But generally what you really kind of want to be looking right now is looking at your budgets long term. An average user right now of gas could be lowering their budget 50 grand a year lower for 24, 25, and 26 years versus what's coming up in 22 and 2023. So there's multiple ways to manage these budgets, lock in prices. I even have a large manufacturer now hedging prices for the years 25 and 26 and leaving the next nightmare, which you see on these charts, really kind of is a nightmare. Can I go to the next ones here? And the natural gas chart looks very mimic to your electricity chart, and that's because 70% of our electricity in New York State is natural gas generated. We've shut down the coal plants. Huntley recently is all you've seen in New York State. So as so goes natural gas prices, you've seen now them correlate into your electricity prices, even at your house. So what you've probably paid at your house, just to give you some comparison, your budgets in the next 12 months will almost be 2.5 times, almost triple what you paid in the next 12 months for your house at your costs. And there's ways to mitigate these things, and there's a way to cut your costs down, but you got to be looking very long term. At EnergyMark for 13 years, when COVID came around, pretty much everybody in 2019, 2020, on the far left of these charts, you can see probably paid the lowest energy prices they've ever paid. And locking long-term was probably the most beneficial for you. I think we're in a different environment, and I think the next 10 years of my life is going to be protecting customers going forward on the long haul. Carolyn, can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Now I've highlighted a little bit of the examples on this, and this is actually as of yesterday's market, but it gives you a little bit of what natural gas prices are trading at. And you can see that in calendar 22, we're, roughly if you wanted to buy gas for 2022, you're trading right around $7.40 a decatherm. This morning, the storage report came out, and the last few days, we've actually seen some red in the market. So fortunately, we are seeing a couple things down. Believe it or not, just 2 days ago, we were over $8 gas. Gas has come down $1 in literally the last 3 days to somewhere around $7.36. And in the last 10 years, you haven't seen gas realistically north of $4, except for the last 6 months, which is on the bottom of this chart. All the reds are the highest of the year, and all the greens are the lowest of the year. And if you really want to see the calendar 25 and 26, conceivably for a large manufacturer, their budgets are minimum $250,000 lower to lock in gas prices for those terms than what we're experiencing in 2022. I even have a customer who uses quite a bit of diesel, and he's locked in his diesel prices and has saved over $500,000 by locking in his diesel prices for his business a little more than a year ago. And he has a full year left on those, which has saved him considerably at the pump for his trucking. So there's other ways to look at these things and to hedge these costs and to mitigate some of the high prices we're seeing. The next slide and we can get out of here so you guys can enjoy your lunches, is the green initiatives. EnergyMark has built the community solar farm in West Valley, which was built on a brownfield site. It was on the old nuclear waste site. It was also NYSERDA. EnergyMark is solely based in Williamsville here, but we supply accounts and customers out of state. I have lots of customers in Wisconsin, Idaho, Pennsylvania, numerous other states. So as much as we're centralized here, like Tronconi, we handle things in any state across the US, even we actually handling some things in Canada now. But now the way of New York State, which is the incentives, which you may have seen, is to literally, you cannot build a house with natural gas in it after 2025. These are actually becoming the new initiatives in New York State, is to go green. And these are the incentives for you to apply your meter to community solar farms, rather than putting it on your building of your plant or your small business, mid-sized business. Now you can pay nothing. You are actually paying for it in your invoices, as Andy kind of alluded to earlier. And these are subsidized by these initiatives like your SPC charges on your bills and the clean energy standard charges, the renewable energy credit charges. These are all subsidizing these projects. And if it's similar to you paid for it when you picked up your Pepsi 6-pack or your bottle deposits, and if you don't go back and get your community solar discounts on your bills right now for your businesses, you're paying too much. So we can help you navigate the green aspects. Certainly FERC, the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, are mandating that everybody's becoming sustainable. And this is one way to lower your costs collectively together, and we can help you with those if you guys want to reach out. I'm sure Carolyn can share my information for anybody, or it's on there if anybody has any questions. But we'd love to help anybody kind of look at what they have. I'm sure Andy would agree with me that 9 out of 10 times when we can look at somebody's utility bills, we'll find dollars. And we shake our head almost every other month at the fact that we can still find dollars for people and corrections or adjustments. And it was kind of, I smirked at the Carolyn's poll that many don't know, or what they've got to do, or they got to find an accounts payable person to help it. But typically, Andy and I working together and Tronconi, we can certainly usually find some adjustments on your bills, and it doesn't take much for us to just do a quick glance and look at them.
As costs are rising, everybody's looking to find a way to cut costs. So
Certainly.
you guys presented a lot of good options and things to think about. So I thank you for that. Like we mentioned, there will be an email coming to you with a post-webinar survey. Give us some feedback on this. And again, let us know if you thought of a question that you want answered, or if you want to set an appointment with one of our experts today. Just fill that out and it'll come back to us. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our experts and all the information you shared, ways companies can save some money. Next month's topic will be expanding through acquisition on May 10th, and we look forward to seeing everybody then. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.